So I'm here in the paddock at Brands Hatch with the founder of the OSS Championship, Alan Jenkins. Can you tell us how you had the idea and how you got it started, please, Alan?
Yeah, certainly, Rachel. It all came out from an idea back in 2008 with Steve Griffiths, a very good friend of mine, used to race in Brit Sports with a 3 litre, 2 litre Jade. And with the demise of Brit Sports, there was nowhere to go and race sports prototypes. So we set up our own championship for Steve to go racing.
And when was your first championship then?
Right, so we started off, you can't start off as a championship, we had to start off as a series, which was in 2009, hence the Open Sports Car Series, OSS. It was so successful that the BRSCC then applied for championship status, and the name OSS has stuck ever since. The Open being the open regulations, because all we wanted to do is to get all the sports prototypes that are sitting in garages out racing.
So if there are people sat on their settees at home thinking about racing and thinking that this might be for them, can you tell us a little about what the requirements are, if any, and how to go about joining and going racing with you?
Well, there's lots of sports prototypes on the market. Buy a sports prototype and come and race it. There are no regulations. We've got a varied class structure, so all cars are very welcome.
So open in every sense of the word then?
No, we've got closed-top cars. The open is just applies to the regulations, because there are no regulations other than the MSA safety regulations. So we've got cars like the Bowlby, some of the guys have got the home-built cars, even up to LMP2 cars. So there's a whole wide range of cars out there.
I understand from talking to the drivers this afternoon that it's actually the cars that matter and the cars that gain the points, and that there can be more than one driver to the car. So does that make it even more accessible? No,
I'm afraid that they've got that wrong actually, because it's the drivers that score the points. But drivers can share the points, share the car, so their individual points go towards the championship. So a shared driver has a standing in the championship points.
So really my point was there is actually it's a cheaper way potentially, there's someone there to share the costs with potentially.
Yes, potentially, yes, and we get quite a number of people who want to share the car, which is absolutely great.
Okay, so have you got a website, email address or Facebook page that the guys can be looking up if there's, or girls, sorry, if anyone's sat home on the sofa thinking about it seriously?
Yes, we have a website, opensportscarseries.co.uk, and we've got a Facebook page.
Wonderful. And where's your next round?
Our next round now is in October at Donington on the 18th and 19th of October, which is the championship finals.
Wonderful. Well, we hope to join you then.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Rachel Thorne and I'm here at Brands Hatch, where this weekend the Indy circuit is playing host to the next rounds of the EXCOOL OSS Championship. It's a championship for open sports cars, and with changeable weather over the 3 races this weekend, you're in for some exciting action, so stay tuned.
Well, thanks Rachel, and the cars are now on their green flag lap ready to get going. It will be a 15-minute race around the Brands Hatch Indy circuit. Here's the grid. Duncan Williams in the Juno on pole position. The Genvy Gun TS6 of Mike Genvy will line up alongside him. Then you've got the Ligier of Simon Tilling and Paul Spencer next up in his Radical SR8. Then Richard Ferns and Graham Hill, row 3. Row 4 for Ginger Marshall and Roland Lewis. Then you've got Mike Roberts and Jerry Hulford rounding out the top 10. Then John Gray and David Enderby, row 6. Row 7, Alistair Smart and Sean Mellors. And Paul Watson is at the back of the grid in the second of the Aquilas. Mike Stewart is also at the wheel of an Aquila. It doesn't look as though he's unfortunately going to be able to potentially make the start of this one. So ready to go racing then. It will be a 2x2 rolling start with Williams and Genvy on the front row. Then the black Juno of Williams, the white Genvy Gun of Mike Genvy on the outside of the front row. Then Simon Tilling, does he have the pace to go with them? The 3 of them are covered by just half a second in qualifying. The green flag is out, we're racing, and we go on board with Paul Spencer in 4th place. You can see the battle for the lead in front, and it's Williams who hangs on from Genvy in 2nd, then Tilling 3rd. Spencer slots into 4th place, but he's starting to come under pressure for that 4th place from, I think that might be Richard Ferns. Everyone making their way tentatively through Druids. There's the number 7 ADR of Mike Roberts, and in behind him in car number 50, that's Jerry Hulford in the Wolf GBO 08 in behind the black and gold car. But everyone is safely through Paddock and Druids and Graham Hill for the first time, and now they can start stretching their legs a bit down the Cooper Straight. Through Surtees, the left-hander. That battle still raging there. That's Mike Robertson. He's trying to find a way past the number 63 machine of Richard Lewis, but Richard is holding sway at the moment in Roland Lewis, in his Jade. And as they head out of the final turn, the race leaders are already up at Paddock Hill Bend. This is the fight, though, for 4th position, because the top 3 are starting to pull away now. Duncan Williams, Mike Genvie and Simon Tilling. The battle for 4th, though, sees Paul Spencer coming under increasing pressure from Richard Ferns, who goes round the outside, but on the dirty side of the road, he loses it. Richard Ferns loses it, and does he stall the car? I think he's got it fired back up again. That's lucky, because he didn't hit anything, and B, he didn't get the car stalled and stranded on the outside of the track. Nonetheless, it's lots of places lost for Richard, and he's got work to do now on a track where it's tough to pass, even if you have a significant car advantage. Race leaders are at clearways again already. As I said, the lap times around here very, very quick indeed, lapping in the 44-45 second bracket for the front runners. Mike Genvie, most definitely a regular front runner in the championship. Someone's off though at clearway. That looks like it might be Mike Roberts. It is. Mike Roberts has gone off, so that little battle he was having with Roland Lewis is put on ice for the time being. Rejoins the track, but crosses the track and leaves gravel all over the place. So Duncan Williams runs wide, coming out of Druids that time. But when they get to clearways, they could find a bit of gravel on the road, and another car off at clearways, and that's Jerry Hulford. Jerry Hulford's sent the Wolf off into the gravel trap, unfortunately. The inside goes Richard Ferns, finds a way past the 39 car of Sean Mellors. But the safety car we're hearing is on standby, so we may be seeing a safety car interlude shortly so that the car of Jerry Hulford can be recovered from the Clearways gravel trap. The race leaders go through there. They're still battling for the time being. And look, they're already catching the back of the field. The Aquilas have been caught and in traffic. Duncan Williams has to slow down. Mike Genvie attacks around the outside. They weave their way in and out of the slower cars, and Genvie tries to go right around the outside of Drews. We've seen already from Richard Ferns how that can go wrong. Or he gets squeezed out onto the curb, but if that hadn't have happened, that might just have worked for Genvie, because he'd have had the inside line for Graham Hill Bend, but he just ran out over the curb and the grasscrete on the exit of Druid, lost his momentum, lost his traction, and now they see the yellow flags that signify the safety car is indeed going to be coming out, and Duncan Williams is going to be able to relax slightly more for a few minutes at least, with Mike Genvie unable to attack under safety car conditions. That was a very, very close call indeed, and in traffic, that's one of the joys of multi-class racing. 5 different classes of cars out there with pretty big differences in performance. And so you see quite often when you get into the back markers, it can really change the shape of the race quite dramatically. It's just one of the things that the racing drivers out there have to deal with. Marshals get busy digging Jerry Hulford out of the gravel trap. The safety car is out, neutralises the field for the time being. And Duncan Williams, Mike Genvie and Simon Tilling, who were all still running quite closely together before that safety car came out anyway, it hasn't really affected them too much. They should have the pace to pull away from the rest of the field once we get going and continue their 3-way squabble for the race lead. We'll see if perhaps Simon Tilling can get himself into the mix a little bit more now. Those are the first 3 cars then. Williams from Genvie, from Tilling, the top 3. They accelerate out of clearways. Williams has gone already. Genvie goes with him. Tilling was a little bit asleep there and didn't quite manage to go with the top 2. So initially speaking, at least, no, he has not been able to go with them, but we'll see if that changes as the race goes on. Up towards Paddock Hill Bend they go. They plunge downhill and climb back up again towards the right-hander at Druids, where Williams takes a slightly conservative line into the corner, but Genvie was nowhere near close enough really to launch an attack up the inside. There goes Tilling. Here are some of the scraps a bit further down the order. The 72 car of Graham Hill there with Ginger Marshall in behind, and the green machine of John Gray in his Jade Mark 1. Variety really is the spice of life in the Open Sports Car Series. And it's great to see all of the different shapes and sizes out on the grid. There is the Radical of Richard Ferns that had that spin earlier on, and he's up behind Ginger Marshall now, coming through clearways and out onto the straight. You'd imagine the newer machine should be able to find a way through along the pit straight. Yep, mirror signal manoeuvre, pulls to the outside. Ginger didn't really have much he could have done then, and so through goes Richard Ferns into Paddock Hill Bend again. Drop downhill, so next target for Richard is just up the road, in fact, from him. He's already catching, look, so in clean air Richard Ferns is absolutely flying down towards Graham Hill Bend. And that is Graham Hill who he's caught now. He goes up the inside into Surtees, and good stuff. Graham Hill again forced really to just let him go, because this is a committed drive from Richard Ferns. He was up there dicing for 4th place before he had that spin, and that now puts him into the 5th position again. So Richard is charging his way back up through the field. across the line. He's already racing away from Graham Hill. The problem is Paul Spencer is quite a long way up the road. You can see there's a lot of clean air in front of him, so it's not going to be easy to catch him. Here are the three Aquilas, meanwhile. The Class E battle is hotting up. Number 95 is Paul Hill. He's got into second place. That's at the expense of Kevin Swenson. But it's Michael Stewart that is leading the class in front of them. At the same time, the race leaders are carving their way through. Look, they're catching them every 3 or 4 laps, aren't they? And Duncan Williams and Mike Genvy are having to deal with much, much slower traffic, whilst at the same time trying to fend each other off and race for the race lead. Down through Paddock Hill Bend, back up towards Druids again. And Duncan Williams continues to lead the way, but Mike Genvy is staying right with him. He's hot on his heels and he's there. He's close enough that if Williams has an issue or makes a mistake or maybe gets a bit held up by a back marker, Mike is right there and close enough to attack and take advantage of it, isn't he? A little bit of damage perhaps is that to the front left corner. It's hard to tell of Duncan Williams' car. If it is, it's not slowing him down one little bit. Cross the line again. More back markers coming into play up in front of them. I think that's Sean Mellors they're putting a lap on now. Heading through. Sorry, no, it wasn't. It was the Radical Club Sport of Alistair Smart, I beg your pardon. Running down in the 11th position at the moment is Alistair. Through Druids, Genvy closing back in. Then it's not even like the gap ebbs and flows over the course of a lap. They seem very evenly matched at all parts of the circuit, but Williams is the first one having to catch the back markers. He's the one that's alerting the back markers to their presence, which means that when Genvy gets there, they already know the leaders are coming and they sort of get out of his way. But Williams is really having to force the issue with some of these back markers, and it's not only holding him up, but it's putting him in some risky situations where he doesn't really want to be in. Be all too easy to trip over a back marker, do some damage to the car, or spin off the road completely. And Duncan has to be careful about this. Genvy is right there filling his mirrors. Next car to go a lap down is Sean Mellors. That is Sean Mellors then in the Radical SR3 RS. And Williams again gets held up in traffic. He's going to be forced to the outside line, but now Genvy's got to find a way through as well. Oh dear, well Mellors did get out of his way, but I think Genvy was forced to touch offline through Graham Hill Bend. Oh no, it's all gone wrong in Class E. Michael Stewart has spun now. Was that contact, I wonder, with one of the other Aquilas? That won't go down well. Or was it all on his own? The other two were right there. There is one of them being put a lap down. That was either Kevin Swenson or Paul Watson. But something just happened to Michael Stewart in the yellow number 99 car to spin him off the road at Clearways. We'll hope he can get going again. And now another one of the Aquilas has held up the race leader. And Mike Genvy again sensed an opportunity up the inside into Druids, but he was just a touch too far back. They put a lap now on John Gray, running in 8th place. Oh, and another spin for an Aquila, and this time it's Paul Hill. Paul Hill has lost it up at Druids. And that car may be stranded, I'm not too sure. Mike Genvy, though, is right up with Duncan Williams. This is closer than he's been for quite some time. Through Surtees, to stay away from that curb because it'll unsettle the car. Hard on the brakes now into McLaren's, the right-hander, and then Clearways back out onto the pit straight. And Genvy just can't find a way through. It's got to be so frustrating for him. But he's had this the other way around as well before, when he's been in the race lead this year. And other drivers, Duncan included, have been unable to find a way through. And it's got to be a little bit frustrating, but Mike knows that he can't really afford to take a huge risk here because they've got another race to go this weekend. They need to keep that car in one piece. And the red flags are out. The red flags are out. Now, that must be, yes, there because of Paul Hill's car that is stranded up at Druids. So the red flags are out. That might be the end of the race because we've gone past, I think... Yes, we've gone past the three-quarter race distance, so that may well be it. Duncan Williams brings the cars round to the pit straight, but the red flags have been shown rather than the safety car because we've already gone past 13 minutes into this 15-minute race. So I would imagine that this may well be it, which is good news for Duncan Williams, and it is. So there is the result then. Duncan Williams with the win, Mike Genvy second, Simon Tilling third, Paul Spencer fourth, Richard Ferns is fifth, Graham Hill sixth, Ginger Marshall seventh, and John Gray eighth. Because the results go back a lap, they are actually classified on the lead lap. Sean Mellors ninth, Roland Lewis rounds out the top 10, Alistair Smart is 11th, Michael Stewart wins Class E, despite having that spin up at Clearways. Paul Watson is second, and we lost Paul Hill, Mike Roberts and Jerry Hulford over the course of the race.
So it's rather a crowded garage you've got here, Graham. Do you want to tell us who we've got supporting you today?
Yeah, well, I have my family here with me. In the driving seat right now is my son Cameron. 13. This is my daughter Grace, my daughter Hannah and my daughter Molly, who are triplets and great supporters of our racing, so we're very pleased they could be with us.
I understand that the OSS Championship is very family orientated. You're a clear advocate of that. Is this indicative of every weekend for you or for other races in the championship?
Not every weekend, because it's actually really nice to get away from them sometimes. So actually we live quite close, so it's actually ideal for us to be nearby, but it's lovely when we do get the support.
And tell us a little bit about the car you're racing in the championship, please, Graham.
Yeah, it's a Radical PR6. It's new for us this season, so we're getting to learn it quite quickly. I used to have a Radical Pro Sport, which we used for 2 seasons previously in OSS. So this year was a change, a more modern car, some more challenges for us in terms of setup and development. We'd learned the other one, so try and make life a bit more difficult for ourselves by getting something new to play with.
You're clearly an OSS veteran, so to speak. Have you been in the championship since it started?
Well, no, we haven't actually. I used to do the Speed Series here in 2010, and then I met Alan Jenkins, who runs the series for us up at Autosport, and Simon, who's in the car next to us, and they lured me in 2011. I did a small part of that season, and then all of 12 and all of 13 and 14. So it's just been a good season and a great series for us. Suits our lifestyle and a really nice place to be.
You say Brands is your local circuit. How have you found the weather conditions here this weekend?
It's very British, but I like the wet weather. We have one of the least powerful cars here, so the wet weather's good for us. I like the wet, it's always good fun. So the power advantage of some of the other guys is sort of neutralised a little bit here. And Duncan's given me a few secrets for where the wet line is, so I've hung on to those. So yeah, it's been a really good round for us. Actually, it's been great.
You clearly had no trouble keeping it on the black stuff during the wet race. So are you looking forward to the second race?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we did have a little bit of trouble, not as much as it might have seemed, but yeah, fingers crossed we might have a reasonably dry one, which means that we'll undo all the work that we've been doing this morning. So that'll be great. It is what it is. That's racing in the UK, and the scene here is everybody helps each other, so that's what makes it really nice.
Well, the rumour is, if it's to be believed, that Blue Skies are on their way in. So does that make a difference to your plan for the next race?
Yeah, we've got a few things that we'll need to change to do that, but other than that, we'll just pump the tyres up and put some fuel in it and see what happens, I think.
Well, all I can do is wish you the best of luck.
Thank you very much, really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us. Okay, so I'm here with the European Formula Ford Championship of 2015, Kevin Suenson. You've just joined the EXCOOL OSS Championship this year. It's a two-driver, one-car championship, I understand. Tell us how that works a little.
It works like I'm coming from Denmark to England, and then I have a teammate like Paul Hill, and then we're going to race together, and we're doing 3 laps in the qualifying each, and then he will race the first race, and I'll be racing the 2 races today. So that's how it works, and then we get points for the car, not for the drivers. So even though there will come a new driver next time, we will have the advantage that the car will get the points, not the drivers.
Thank you, Kevin. Are you nervous about the racing this afternoon in these rather inclement conditions?
Well, I have been racing a lot in rain in the Formula Ford, so actually I get lots of experience, both from go-kart and from Formula Ford. So nervous a bit. There's fast cars out there, but let's see how it works. I think it will go fine.
Racing is racing. You're just looking forward to getting out there, I can tell.
Oh yeah, I'm just looking forward to race, as always.
Okay, well, good luck, Kevin.
Thank you.
Ginger Marshall, tell us a little bit about the car you're racing in the OSS Championship at the moment.
Well, it's a bit of an oddball because we built it, a friend of ours built a prototype very similar to this, a chap by the name of Ben Bowlby, who eventually went to work for Lola and then left and went to America, and he designed the Delta Wing Le Mans car and also this year's Le Mans front-wheel drive LMP1 car. But he got out of the club racing field, and a friend of ours wanted one of these cars as well, so we said, well, build a couple like Ben's, because Ben's car we couldn't get in, so we had to build 2 more very similar, and racing Clubmans. And then the Clubman's class for our engine sort of fell apart, so we didn't have anywhere to race. So we then started to do open sports cars with it, which it really wasn't. entirely suitable for, but it's all we got. So we've just tried to make it work all these years, because we're running out of life to build a new car.
Well, it seems to be working out. How are you finding the season with the OSS?
Well, I love the OSS, actually. We've been doing it now for as long as it's been running, and it's very friendly, and everybody helps everybody else, and because there's so few regulations, apart from normal sporting regulations and safety regulations, that there's no cheating, and you can't possibly cheat because you can do anything you want.
That's a novel way of putting it, I'll give you that. What are you looking for in the next race out this weekend?
Well, perhaps a clear visor, actually, because I've got a system I've been using for a long time to keep a clear visor, and it's failed me today, and so I fell away from my little chase. But hopefully a reasonable result would be nice, yes.
Good. Well, that rain was fairly unforgiving, so I think you can be let off that one. Good luck in your next race.
Well, thank you very much. I'll keep my fingers crossed and keep it on the black.
Always a good plan. Thank you very much for joining us, Ginge.
Bye-bye.
So I'm here in the paddock now with Alistair Smart from the OSS Championship. Tell us how you got started in the championship, Alistair, please.
Well, Graham Hill and I race together with WSC Motorsport. So I've been racing for 2 or 3 years in Caterhams, and Graham persuaded me to buy a Radical. So this is my first season racing OSS, so it's a big learning curve. It's aero, it's slicks. So the way of racing is completely different to what I've been used to over the last 2 years, but thoroughly enjoyable, really good fun.
Tell us exactly what it is you love about the championship so much then, please.
I mean, if you look around the paddock and you look at the number of people here, you know, it's a very friendly paddock, friends and family, and the camaraderie. If anything goes wrong with any of the cars, everyone mucks in and helps. It's highly competitive, very, very quick at the front end. Front end cars have got 700 brake. I've got a Club Sport Radical, and it's chassis number 11, so a very early Radical. Any more Club Sports out there, please come and race. I'm on my own, so it would be nice if I could have a little bit more competition. But I'm enjoying the championship, fourth at the moment, so it's going well, finishing every race and thoroughly enjoying it.
So if there are people out there watching at home that are thinking about this, how should they go about joining, or who should they talk to? Tell us a little bit about that.
If they talk to Alan Newton at OSS, or they go through the BRSCC, they can find it on the website, and they can find the championship details also on Facebook, so we're readily accessible.
Good. And how have you been finding racing here at Brands Hatch this weekend? The climate conditions have been so varied, a typical British summer.
Yes, the last race in the wet was very challenging. It's the first time I've raced this in the wet, so a learning curve for me. Yesterday's race was dry, but difficult, very bitty, safety car, red flag. So hopefully the last race of the day today, it will dry up and we can get the slicks back on and get on the power.
So it should all come together for you before the last race then, you hope?
Let's hope so, yes.
Good, I hope so too. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
So we're here at Brands Hatch for the next round of the OSS EXCOOL Championship, and I'm with Simon Tilling. Tell us a little bit about your car and how it ran in qualifying in yesterday's race.
Okay, so it's a Ligier made by a French company with a name like Ligier. It's a JS49. It used to run in an endurance championship called V2V, but since I bought it a couple of years ago, we've done a lot to it. We've turbocharged it. It's probably got twice the power it had originally. It was running really well yesterday. Yeah, we qualified on third, first in class, and we finished third, first in class. So it doesn't get much better than that, really. Good day.
But how interesting is it going to be going out in a very wet track now for the race too?
It's going to be very interesting, I think, in inverted commas. It'll be interesting to see how the lower powered cars perform on a day like today, because it's a lot more about the driver than the car when the weather's like this. So come and see me at the end and see whether I still feel the same.
Okay, I will do, but do you anticipate a problem with back markers then if the lower classes are going to have difficulty in the weather?
I think the hardest thing in this weather is keeping the car on the black bits and not the green bits. It really is a challenge, especially with these cars. They put up an awful lot of spray, so if you're not at the front, as people will have seen on the TV watching Formula One, it's very difficult to see where you're going, so yeah, it'll be interesting.
So you've got to hold your nerve out there, and you're hoping to presumably finish on another podium?
I'm hoping to finish, and I'm hoping the car's in one piece. Anything after that will be a bonus.
Well, I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you very much. See you later.
Well, how things have changed. Yesterday we saw a bone-dry race here at Brands Hatch. The sun was shining, but now the circuit is wet. It's raining quite heavily, and this will be a very different matter indeed. Here's the grid. Mike Genvy on the pole this time. Duncan Williams is second place. Simon Tilling on the second row of the grid again with Paul Spencer fourth. Then row 3, Miles Hulford and Richard Ferns. Row 4, Graham Hill and Ginger Marshall. Fifth row for Roland Lewis and Chris Enderby. Then out of the top 10, number 7, Mike Roberts on the 6th row alongside 39, Gary Ramsdale. Then row 7 for John Gray and Alistair Smart. And Matt Domin is at the back of the grid. The grid for this race set by the second fastest qualifying times. So the first race saw Williams on pole from Genvy second because their outright fastest lap times put them in that order, but based on second fastest times it's Genvy ahead. But we'll see what he can do about Duncan Williams. He couldn't find a way past Duncan, but now he's got an opportunity perhaps to get ahead of him right from the word go. The spray will be a factor as well for anyone mired back in the pack, and 15 more minutes of Open Sports Car Series action about to get underway. It's a very bunched up start, but away we go. On board with Graham Hill then as he follows the top 4 cars up towards Paddock Hill Bend, and he just hits a wall of spray. Can't see a thing. Duncan Williams has gone through into the race lead though. Yes, he has. So Genvy has not been able to take full advantage of starting on pole position. Williams has gone through. Genvy drops into second. Tilling is third. Side by side for fourth because Richard Ferns is going right around the outside of Druids, and that's where the grip is in the wet. You don't want to be running around the traditional racing lines on the inside of the corners. You can see most of the drivers will keep a decent gap between their car and the apex of the corners because where the rubber is laid down in the wet, that becomes very, very slippery. On board with Jerry Hulford, who was a non-finisher in yesterday's race. Up through Surtees, and look how slowly they're having to go. There's just no grip at all on cold tyres as well. Of course, these cars produce a lot of downforce, but the downforce only works at speed. Once you're going slowly, you're relying entirely on mechanical grip, and because it's so wet, they can't generate any mechanical grip from the tyres and the suspension, so they're just left with no grip at all. Simon Tilling has got Richard Ferns behind him, side by side behind there. That looks like Graham Hill. Yep, Graham Hill moves up a spot then, so that puts him into the top 6 now. I think Jerry Hulford was the man he got ahead of, and they drop down through Paddock Hill Bend through the standing water at the bottom. You can see how easily Simon Tilling's taking it in the Ligier. That could allow Richard Ferns to attack, but Graham Hill's going to attack him as well. 3 completely different lines taken into Druids, and it will be side by side just about between Richard Ferns and Simon Tilling. Jerry Hulford's got Graham Hill's got a fantastic view of it from the number 72 car. Tilling stays ahead, and then Graham Hill buys into it as well. Goes up the inside and nicks 4th place away. So Richard Ferns goes from attacking for a podium position to dropping down to 5th place. Into Surtees now, he tries to fight back again. It's all happening in slow motion, but believe me, this is very hard work indeed for the drivers, and they're racing very, very hard indeed, considering it's early days in this race, but they know that track position is crucial. If you get yourself to the head of this little group, then you'll be out of the spray, and your life suddenly becomes an awful lot easier. Across the line again, Graham Hill tries to get around the outside of Simon Tilling. The big rear wing on that Ligier perhaps creating a bit of extra drag. Creates a bit of extra downforce as well, but it creates extra drag down the straight, and that means he's not quite as quick as Graham Hill is on the straights, but he keeps him behind through Paddock. Graham's had a good exit from that corner though, looks to the inside towards Druids as they crest the rise. I think Graham Hill's going to go through. Is he? Yes, he is. The Radical PR6 moves ahead of the Ligier, and Simon Tilling drops down a position. 4th place for him now. Then Richard Ferns is once more filling his mirrors, but he'll see first of all if he can do anything about getting back past Graham Hill. Out of Graham Hill Bend they go, and into Surtees. And Graham now starting to pull away. Simon Tilling having to watch his mirrors because Richard Ferns is there with him again. Into Surtees and McLaren. And then clearways onto the pit straight. Much tighter line taken there by Richard Ferns. That's the traditional dry racing line. And again, you can see Tilling just manages to keep himself ahead of the number 42 Radical for the time being. Anyway, Richard Ferns is Radical SR8. Similar car to Paul Spencer, in fact, who's also in the race in a Radical SR8, not far behind them. Through Paddock Hill Bend, Tilling still just about keeping Richard Ferns behind him. Up towards Druids, though, this is where Graham Hill got past him on the previous lap. You can see why, because he leaves the door wide open to take that traditional wet racing line around the outside, but it allows Richard Ferns through on the inside line. So Ferns gets ahead of him, and now that looks like Miles Hulford is the next man who could be about to slip through. Down the Cooper Straight, up towards the left-hander at Surtees. And Simon Tilling is really struggling in these wet conditions. Yeah, there is Hulford, and then in behind him, there is car number 16, Paul Spencer, who started this race up in 4th place. So he's obviously had a drama early on somewhere. He's dropped down the order, but he's got the pace now to move his way back through. Hulford's right behind Tilling now. Moves to driver's left because Tilling's going to try and defend the line as they cross the line. Headlights ablaze for Hulford. Onto the brakes into paddock. And Miles has to watch his mirrors though, because Paul Spencer there is not far back in the Radical. Again, 3 completely different cars. You've got the Ligier of Tilling, you've got the Wolf of Miles Hulford, and then the Radical, the newer Radical of Paul Spencer, and all 3 of them fairly evenly matched, it seems, with Tilling perhaps the weak link, but he's the one at the head of the group, backing them all up. 3 Druids back along the Cooper Straight. And they stretch themselves out for the time being. Meanwhile, Duncan Williams, yesterday's race, he had Mike Genvy breathing down his neck from lights to flag, but in this one, he's scarpering up the road, already over 10 seconds ahead. This is the battle, though, further down the order again, between Miles Hulford and Paul Spencer. Ginger Marshall's not far behind them either. Just there, in the Bowlby Mark II. Across the start-finish line, another lap is ticked off. On board again with Miles Hulford. Takes a wide line into Paddock Hill Bend, and Paul Spencer takes full advantage to move through. Race leader is at Druid, so he's already almost a lap ahead of that group. He really is flying. Taking a very tight line there out of Druids. Again, staying away from the rubbered up part of the circuit. Trying to find some grip and traction on the exit of one of the tight corners on the track, one of the many tight corners on this Indy circuit layout. Through Surtees, through McLaren again. And this beautifully prepared Juno sports car of Duncan Williams is really making this weekend his own. As I said, he had very much a run for his money from Mike Genvy in the first race. But in this one, Mike has not been able to go with him. Check back in with the Simon Tilling and Paul Spencer battle, though. Paul, having now got past Miles Hulford, is right up with him. There is Mike Genvy, just putting a lap on the 77 of John Gray. Ginger Marshall's got himself someone to race with as well. That's Alistair Smart behind him. Duncan Williams is about to put a lap on those 2. Miles Hulford through Surtees, through McLaren, and we check back into Duncan Williams, who, with the EXCOOL sponsored car, EXCOOL is the series sponsor as well. The EXCOOL OSS Championship this is. And he's going to put a lap quite comfortably, I think, there on Ginger Marshall. Number 77 is John Gray in the Jade Mark 1, and he loses it at Graham Hill Bend. Just a bit too eager with the right foot there, I think, was John. And he rejoins. But that, having finished 8th place in yesterday's race, that will have dropped him down a few more positions, I think. And his chance of a top 10 finish in this one pretty much gone by the wayside now. The race leader, and he's about to negotiate that titanic scrap between Tilling and Smart and Hulford. And as they come down through Graham Hill Bend, that will be a very, very tricky situation for Duncan Williams, because you've got 3 cars that have been doing battle pretty much since the start of the race to negotiate. They're not paying attention on what's coming up quickly behind them. Lap time wise, Duncan Williams is lapping in the mid 52 second range. That lot are lapping in the 58, so he's lapping 6 seconds a lap quicker than them. He's going to appear very quickly behind them. Paul Spencer goes up the inside into Paddock Hill Bend, finds a way finally past Simon Tilling just as they're about to put a lap on Alistair Smart in the Radical Club Sport. Can Tilling fight back on the run up towards Druids? I don't think so, because the inside line is covered, and now the race leader is there. Look, and you can see there, Tilling doesn't let him through. I don't think he realised Duncan Williams was coming quite so quickly. Oh, and then Tilling gets sideways out of Druids, and he was heading briefly straight towards the side of the race leader's car. This is why these are such heart-stopping moments for the race leader. It doesn't look like much from the outside, but from the inside, when you're negotiating these cars, especially with the spray making the visibility difficult, it really is very, very tense indeed. But Duncan knows he's got this comfortable race lead. He doesn't really have to take too many risks, and that's why he's being very circumspect with the back markers. Paul Spencer now lets him go. That move for Paul put him into 4th place, but he's quite a long way behind Graham Hill, so I don't think he's going to catch him before the end. Number 77 of John Gray did return to the track then after his off at Graham Hill last time, a few laps ago. Duncan Williams makes his way back up the hill. He may even lap Mike Genby before the end of the race at this rate, because he's lapping a second or so a lap quicker than Mike as well. Down the hill, he's just put Richard Ferns a lap down. He was running in 5th position. So Paul Spencer will be the next man he's lining up to go 1 lap down. Check back in with Miles Hulford briefly, heading into the left-hander at the bottom of the hill. Car number 50 looking quite a bit cleaner now than the last time we saw it, after he was in the gravel trap at Clearways on the previous lap. He's now catching Simon Tilling. That's the next little battle that's going to develop, isn't it? The Wolf re-catching the Ligier. Remember, they were dicing before, and then Miles has dropped some way back all of a sudden. And now he's starting to slowly but surely reel the Ligier back in again. Out onto the pit straight, climb up what is quite a steep hill through Clearways, and then up towards the very steep hill at Paddock Hill Bend. Hard on the brake, stay away from the big bump there in the braking zone, which can really unsettle the car. And then stay away from the painted curbs at the bottom of the hill. But Miles Hulford isn't doing that. He used quite a bit of curb there, which is very risky. The painted surface gets icy slippery in the wet. Duncan Williams having to use a bit of curb there through Surtees to negotiate a slower car. But he's still circulating as the race leader. The car he's putting down a lap was Graham Hill, who's running 3rd. So now only Duncan and Mike Genby, here on screen now, are on the lead lap. They're the only 2 cars who have not gone a lap down. And Mike Genby, again, negotiating traffic, but he's only just caught up to Ginger Marshall, who's running down in 9th place, whereas the race leader, Duncan Williams, has just lapped the 3rd placed car. So that's a sort of idea of what the gap is between the 2 of them. Back across the start-finish line comes Mike, and I'm a bit perplexed as to why he's not got the pace in the wet. Mike's a very experienced driver. He's been driving this car for quite some time. A bit surprised, I must say, that he's not been able to go after Duncan Williams a little bit more in this race. After being so close behind him in yesterday's race, when the red flag came out, they were separated by only 0.4 of a second at the effective end of that race. Check back in with Richard Ferns, who's coming through Surtees as well. And Richard has been caught by Paul Spencer. So this now becomes the fight for 4th position then. Paul and Richard in the pair of Radical SR8. So the cars are the same. So this is a straight fight now, but Paul's been lapping significantly quicker than Richard in the last few laps, over a second a lap at times, and he's forcing Richard to defend into paddock. Watch for the switchback manoeuvre maybe, where you take the wide line into the corner, cut back to the late apex, and that's exactly what he does. And Paul Spencer gets to the inside into Druids. No, Richard closes the door quite firmly in his face there. Firmly, but absolutely fairly. And there was nothing untoward in that. That was just a very good defensive line taking into Druids. And so Paul Spencer will have to wait for another opportunity to go through, perhaps. They slither and slide their way out of Graham Hill, which is a slippery enough corner as it is, because it's completely flat. There's no camber to the road there. The car just skates and scrabbles for grip in the wet. It becomes almost like an ice rink. All too easy, especially with these powerful rear-wheel drive sports cars, to be a bit too eager with the right foot and find yourself pointing the right way, as we saw happening to John Gray earlier on in the Jade. Back on the straight then, and Spencer closing in the slipstream. Look, he's going to the inside this time into Paddock Hill Bend. Richard Ferns might have no choice but to let him go, and Paul Spencer moves through into 4th position. Very good move that. He carried good momentum out of Clearways all the way down the straight, forced an opening on the inside, and Richard Ferns, there really wasn't much he could do. You can see already Paul Spencer pulling away, which indicates to me that Paul is significantly quicker than Richard. Now, Graham Hill is a long way up the road, though. I don't think they're going to catch, or Paul at least will catch, 3rd place man Graham Hill, so 4th maybe as high as he gets. There's Mike Genby. He's not far behind them either, so he's quite likely to put a lap on this 4th place squabble before the end of the race. That 4th place squabble is heading through through McLaren now, and the time is ticking away as well, running down towards the end of the race. So Richard Ferns, and the car off, and it's one of the Aquilas, and it's 94, which is Matt Domin, and who started at the back of the grid. He was some way off the pace in qualifying, and sadly he's some way off the track now. He's found the barriers, I think, on the Exeter Druids. Smaller, more lightweight version of the SR8 is now able to move through, put a lap on the Radical Club Sport. even though there are quite a few radicals in the championship, they're all different radicals, aren't they? We've only got the 2 SR8s that are the same. Everything else is a little bit different. So even within the radical ranks, there's variety. As far as the classes are concerned, Duncan Williams and Mike Genvey both in Class B, but Graham Hill is in Class C, so he's leading his class. Paul Spencer and Richard Ferns, that battle we saw between those two for 4th place, had extra significance because they're both in Class A, and that was a move for the race lead in Class A for Paul Spencer, so that was significant. In 3rd position, a very lonely 3rd place at the moment though. There's Paul Spencer 4th, and you can see he is now really starting to pull away from Richard Ferns. Not that drastically, but enough that he will start to feel more comfortable now, I think, in 4th position. There is Mike Genvey, 2nd place, about to put a lap on him. First of all, puts a lap on Alistair Smart, and the Aquila in the barrier of Matt Domin is looking rather steamy, isn't it? I don't think that's a fire, I think that's steam from things overheating, but nonetheless, that's not going to be a pleasant sight for him or the team. And the marshals, hard-working British marshals who've got some pretty filthy weather to be standing out in today, are straight on the scene to deal with that, so we can hopefully see the race run its full conclusion this time, rather than the shortened race yesterday. This is a 20-minute race rather than the 15 minutes we had yesterday, so they're getting extra 5 minutes anyway. Mike Genvey then closing in on 4th place man Paul Spencer to put a lap on him. See, it's still a lot of spray. It's still been raining quite consistently over the course of the race, so although the track's being used now, we still have 11 or 12 cars running to clear the standing water. It's being replaced very quickly by the fresh rainfall, so it's not really getting any better. Through McLaren as he negotiates some of the slower traffic. Ooh dear, Miles Hulford there has a bit of a slippery moment as well on the exit of Clearways. Miles Hulford has got past... no, he hasn't got past Simon Tilling, excuse me. Simon Tilling is still there in front of him, so those two were close together for a while, but Simon's now been able to extend the margin again. Simon's just going another lap down to Duncan Williams. Oh, well, he will do in a second anyway. The orange and white Ligier flashes through in front of him for now. On board with Miles Hulford, who is trying to chase Tilling down. So Hulford's in 7th at the moment. Tilling is in 6th. And Hulford has recently been lapping slightly quicker than him, so we may have a chance of a late change of position between those two before the end of the race. On board with Hulford, we put a lap on Alistair Smart, as Mike Genvey completes another lap. Projecting we should get about 23 laps completed in the 20-minute race. So they've had plenty of track time. There's the Jade going slowly again, unfortunately. John Gray looked to be slowing earlier on, but now it looks a bit more terminal because he brings the Jade into the pit lane, and the distinctive green liveried car is into the pits, and behind Simon Tilling's just spun at Paddock Hill Bend. There he is. And where is Miles Hulford? Has he gone through? I think he has. So that's another place lost for Simon Tilling in what has not been his best race. He was 3rd yesterday in the dry, but in the wet he's clearly struggling for grip, and that spin at Paddock Hill Bend just underlines that issue. So race leader back up at the final couple of corners. I think we're going to have one more lap we can squeeze out of this, maybe 2. Heads out through Clearways. A lot of spray being kicked up now as the rain worsens. There is Miles Hulford. So he did indeed get past Simon Tilling after Simon's rotation. Simon did it all on his own at Paddock. Very easy to do as the track drops away from you. We see drivers do that in the dry. So in the wet, you can imagine how slippery it is through there. Drops down the hill. He continues to use that very tight line as well, doesn't he? Paul Spencer, that is, in front of him, the 4th place man, who's charged his way up through the order, hasn't he, Paul? Started 4th, but for whatever reason had a sluggish start, an opening lap, and dropped down the field quite some way, and now is about to go a 2nd lap down, but he's fairly secure now in that 4th place, about 8 seconds ahead of Richard Ferns. Williams slips through though on the inside at Clearways, comes out across the start-finish line, and is he going to see the checkered flag this time around? Yes, he is. The checkered flag is out then. Duncan Williams does the double. Second place goes to Mike Genvy. They were the only two cars on the lead lap. Graham Hill third, Paul Spencer fourth, then Richard Fearns fifth, Miles Hulford sixth, Simon Tilling seventh, Sean Mellors eighth, Ginger Marshall ninth, Alistair Smart 10th, Kevin Swenson the only remaining finisher in 11th. He wins Class E. John Gray, Matt Domin and Chris Enderby all retired, and Duncan Williams has the overall fastest lap.
So Mike Genvy, championship potential leader of the OSS Championship. Tell us a little bit about your car first, please.
Yeah, it's it ran in Sports 2000 for many years. It's Gary Gunn's original Gunn chassis. My father and I have modified it heavily for we've had it for 8 years. So it's won 2 Sports 2000 championships and obviously now leading the OSS Championship, albeit with a much more powerful engine.
Good, so we're here at Brands Hatch this weekend. How have you found the track in such different conditions over the weekend?
Well, yesterday was good. We're actually running paddle shift for the first time this weekend. We're also running electronic throttle, so it's been a bit hard sort of getting all of that working. We weren't sure how it was going to be in the wet, but absolutely fine. So yeah, it's been good. We just, given the fact that we didn't win that race by a bit, we're looking forward to a wet final race, hopefully.
You mentioned changes to the car. How much of a factor were they in your result today, or do you put it entirely down to the weather or a combination? How would you say?
Obviously, I don't blame it on the driver, but I couldn't get the wets to heat up. So Duncan's obviously done a very good job of getting the wets hot very quickly, and that's what gave him the edge in lap time. And I knew halfway around the first corner it was going to be a tricky race, and we were going to struggle to keep up with him. But you keep trying. I was hoping to pass him in the gravel or something like that, but it never happened. But if it's dry in the third race, we'll get him then.
Okay, well, it certainly looks as though it's brightening up, so I wish you the best of luck in that third and final race.
Thank you very much indeed.
Now I'm here with Richard Fearns, championship leader of Class A. Can you tell us a little bit about the championship and how your season's been so far, please, Richard?
The season's been good so far. A bit of mixed fortunes. Started off really good at the beginning of the season. Won all 3 races at the start. Simon had a bit of bad luck with the engines at the start, which pushed him down a bit. Won a couple of races in the next one, which pushed me right at the front on the championship overall. Then had an engine failure at the last meeting, which has pushed me out of the overall championship leadership, but still just leading the Class A championship. So with a bit of luck, if I can keep that man behind me today, I'll manage to hold on to things.
So a real mix of fortunes so far, but how are you finding this weekend so far, and what are you anticipating for the next race?
Yesterday was very lively. We had lots of safety cars and yellow flags all over the place, so it was interesting yesterday. I had a spin on the first lap and ended up right at the back and managed to, with all the goings on, managed to fight myself back up to 5th overall. So yeah, yesterday was okay. Today is going to be interesting because once again I'm right behind Simon at the start, but this is very good in the wet. It's got good downforce. So
what about this? What about the spray for you being an open top car? I say the car setup okay, but I mean visibility must be dicey for you.
Yeah, it is. I'm used to riding bikes though, so I use stuff called Rain X on the visor, which pours it off, and you can see we tape up the ducts on the engine so we don't get the wheel spray coming up. The ducts on the wings, we tape them up so we don't get the spray coming up from them either. But yeah, visibility is not brilliant.
It's going to be an interesting race, that's for sure. So I hope you keep your wits about you and stay on track. Good luck.
Okay, thank you very much.